Can you tell that I'm prepared for a Stardew Valley video? I'm Sil, they, them. I'm your friendly neighborhood vegan, leftist, autistic, anti-natalist nerd, and I'm not going to look directly into the camera for a lot of the video because that shit is awkward, and also I'm reading off a script, so it is what it is. Also, I want to make a quick disclaimer before some of you smartasses start commenting stuff like, "But Sil, it's just a video game. They're all just pixels. No one actually gets hurt when you shank them or sell their babies in the game." Obviously. What I mean by a vegan character is that within the narrative of the game, the character doesn't participate in exploitation of animals or benefit from it. There can be quite a few reasons why someone might want to play a game this way. Perhaps they want a challenge, perhaps they relate strongly to fictional characters and their struggles, to the extent that it may sometimes feel uncomfortable to them to exploit others, even in a fictional setting. Perhaps they're making a YouTube video and they want to subtly imply that rose-tinted, romanticized depictions of exploitation in media can contribute to normalization of such exploitation in our global consciousness, small as such contributions may be. Now, as Anita Sarkeesian of the Feminist Frequency channel has suggested in her now roughly decade-old videos about the depiction of women in video games, we can enjoy media while being critical of its problematic aspects. So I'm gonna do just that. With that in mind, I want to explore three main questions in this video. Number one, what practices in Stardew Valley are not vegan? Number two, how far can a vegan character get in the vanilla game, meaning without any mods? And number three, how can we modify the game to be a bit more vegan friendly? If you haven't played Stardew Valley to completion yet, this is your spoiler warning for the rest of the video. On the opposite end, it's important to note that I haven't played through content from the recent 1.6 update yet, as well as any endgame content such as Ginger Island. So if any relevant information from it is left out, now you know in advance why. Part 1. What practices in Stardew Valley are not vegan? Perhaps the most obvious forms of exploitation that the game encourages the character to participate in are fishing, purchasing animals, and farming them for secretions. There really isn't much that needs to be said about fishing. Murder is bad. But the game also encourages the character to farm fishes, the uncommodified version plural of fish, for their secretions in fish ponds, or in other words, slavery, which is also bad. Neither the flesh nor the secretions of the fishes are necessary for the character's survival, and therefore such harm is exploitation. Purchasing animals is off limits, not only because it's commodifying, but also because it very likely encourages Marnie to keep breeding and forcing more into existence, which is an issue in and of itself, especially if they're bred to serve as means to someone else's ends. Their secretions are not necessary for survival, and therefore farming them is exploitation. Alright Marnie, time to get a new career. The horse also belongs in this category because if you build a stable, you receive the horse as a part of the package deal. Not to mention that horse riding is slavery anyway. Riding a horse is not necessary for survival, and so buying them and riding them is exploitation. Even if the character has the option to hatch an animal without purchasing them, taking their secretions and benefiting from them without their informed consent is exploitation. Buying animal products from any source is very obviously not vegan because, simply put, they are not ours to trade and benefit from. Taking honey from bees is not vegan because it is, once again, not ours to benefit from. But what about some less obvious forms of exploitation in the game? One that I was initially on the fence on has to do with the mines, as well as any other area that houses potentially hostile animals and monsters. Since they attack you on sight, is it justified to kill them in self-defense? Since Krobus is a monster, and at the same time very clearly sentient, I think it's better to err on the side of caution and assume that all monsters in the mines are sentient too, perhaps excluding undead beings such as skeletons and ghosts. I personally think that the self-defense argument doesn't really work in this case, or rather it's very weak, because the character intrudes into what is essentially the homes of those animals and monsters in order to grab resources from them. If someone walked into our homes and started grabbing random stuff, it would be well within our rights to try to kick them out, even by force if necessary. And if they retaliated, self-defense would be a very weak argument from them in that situation, because of course, they are the transgressor. With all that in mind, and also because none of the resources from the caves are necessary for the character's survival, I personally think that delving into the mines for that purpose is not vegan. The same argument can be applied to any other place that houses hostile animals or monsters, such as the Secret Woods. However, I think that just passing through them without taking anything or harming anyone could be relatively okay. Next up, shore harvesting, another potentially controversial one. Out of all the entities that the character can harvest on the shore, corals are the only ones that are clearly not sentient. I'm pretty sure that the others, mollusks, have been deemed sentient by the scientific community with significant data in recent years. Coupled with the fact that using them is not essential for survival, we can conclude that the most vegan thing to do is leave them alone. Since harvesting coral for profit is not necessary either, and because some other animals on the beach might use them for more important purposes, I think it's best to just leave them there too. Another somewhat niche vegan choice that the character can make, which admittedly I don't have footage for, is whether to let Demetrius relocate a bunch of bats into the farm cave for the purposes of research, or grow mushrooms there. Unless said bats are rescues, which is not mentioned anywhere in the game, removing them from their original homes for the purpose of research without their informed consent is exploitation, and of course we can't get their informed consent. Mushroom research it is then. What about when the character receives a gift whose contents were very clearly derived from exploitation? To consume them or sell them would be to benefit from said exploitation, and to regift them would be to signal to the recipient that benefiting from said exploitation is legitimate, and as vegans we really don't want to do either. I personally believe the most vegan thing to do in such a situation is to simply discard it. Some may say it's worse to let products of exploitation go to waste, but for something to be considered wasted by us, it needs to also be considered a commodity by us first, by default, which veganism advocates against. Also, personally, if someone exploited me for my secretions, it wouldn't be of any consolation to me to know that my secretions were benefited from. Quite the opposite, actually. I wouldn't want anyone to benefit from my exploitation, even after I'm dead. Finally, in character creation, when you choose between a dog and a cat, it's probably a good idea to choose a dog, because cats usually wreak havoc on other animals when allowed outside, and you can't really control in this game whether the animal in your care is outside or inside. They just go around freely. Somehow you don't really feed the dog or the cat in this game, but I think it's worth mentioning that in reality it's much easier to find food for dogs, which doesn't entail exploitation, as opposed to food for cats. But of course, it is possible. Now, I'm sure that there are plenty more very niche situations in the game that call for vegan ethical evaluation, but I think this is a pretty good place to stop for this section at least. And bonus antinatalist points, just don't have kids. Simple as that. Part 2. How far can a vegan character get in the game without any mods? The elephant in the room is the community center. There is no way to complete it without participating in exploitation, primarily due to the fish tank. Therefore, unless the character decides to sell out to Joja, they're not going to set foot on Ginger Island, which is a significant chunk of the endgame content. This begs the question, is there anything not vegan about getting the Joja membership and buying the community upgrades through it? Not that I can think of at face value. Don't get me wrong, helping a massive capitalist corporation outcompete a local general store would leave a very bad taste in my mouth, and there's a strong ethical anti-capitalist case to be made against doing so. But specifically from the lens of veganism, I can't point out any particular forms of animal exploitation in the process. So a vegan character can make it to Ginger Island and therefore not miss out on a lot of endgame content. One might wonder how a character can upgrade their tools and acquire valuable resources that are usually easily found in the mines, without delving into the mines. Thankfully, almost all of those resources can be acquired from geodes and panning. Some of those resources can also be mined in the quarry after the bridge repair community project is purchased, as well as from the hilltop farm if the player chooses that one at the beginning of the game. More significantly, Omni Geodes can be bought from Krobus, as well as from the Oasis store after the player purchases the bus community upgrade. So in theory, the character could upgrade their tools all the way up to Iridium tier, though it might take a while because the stock of these two traders is very limited. Unfortunately, some of the artifacts required to fill up the museum collection are available only in the mines, and so it seems Gunther is going to have to settle for less than a complete collection. The Adventurers Guild is all about killing monsters, so Gil and Marlon are not going to get any new recruits anytime soon. It seems to me like the only goals in the game that the character would miss out on are some quests, some minor explorable areas, a few star drops, and certain achievements, such as the ones that require the character to perform fish murder, cook every dish, ship every item, maximize all skills, etc. With all that in mind, I'm sorry to say this, vegan completionists, but the perfection score in the game is not going to go higher than 11% if you play a vegan character, because the only perfection task that doesn't entail animal exploitation is Great Friends. There might be some more elements in the game that a vegan character would be limited from taking a part in, which I can't seem to recall at the moment, or they are from content which I have not experienced yet. So if you can think of any, let me know in the comments. As a rule of thumb, I'm always open to recreating old videos with updated information and thoughts. I have to say, I'm pleasantly surprised, because I was initially under the impression that a vegan character would not be able to get very far. I used to assume that they wouldn't even be able to make it to Ginger Island, so doing research for this video has definitely taught me a thing or two. Part 3. How can we modify the game to be a bit more vegan friendly? As a quick note, I'm not going to elaborate in this video on how to install mods, because there are plenty of videos out there that do a fantastic job at that, and also I don't feel like doing so. I'll add a link to the Nexus page of every mod I mention here in the video's description. The very first mod that comes to mind is called Vegan Community Center Bundles. It seems to do a wonderful job at replacing item requirements in bundles that entail any form of animal exploitation mentioned earlier in this video. Goodbye, Joja. Next up, there are quite a few mods out there that replace the horse with different types of bicycles. No more running around everywhere by foot. The two that caught my attention are called Loon's Cottage Cycles and Colto's Electric Bikes. Lastly, a mod called Vegan Vanilla Recipes, which changes many cooking and crafting recipes in the game to be vegan. You can find a full list of changes that it implements on its Nexus page, linked in the description of the video. For example, Leah is known to love goat cheese, which this mod allows you to make by putting hazelnuts in a cheese press, veganizing the valley one gift at a time. Now, I'm not familiar with any further mods that can make a playthrough more vegan friendly, but if you know of any, let me know in the comments and I might make a follow-up video. Before we end the video, I think this is a good opportunity to mention that I plan on starting a vegan playthrough series of Stardew Valley with the mods that I just mentioned. So if that sounds like something you'd want to watch, make sure to subscribe. As mentioned earlier, content from the 1.6 update as well as endgame content such as Ginger Island is all new to me, so it's going to be fun to explore it on camera. I got inspired to try playthrough series like that by a fellow vegan anti-natalist variety content creator by the name of Tofu Dog, which I highly recommend you check out as well, link in the description. They started a vegan playthrough of the game as well a few months ago. They made a wonderful point that the vegan and anti-natalist movements could use more fun, casual content like this for the sake of community building, and I couldn't agree more, so I thought, why not try to fill this niche, at least a little bit. I myself really enjoy watching other people play video games, but it always really bums me out when non-vegan content creators nonchalantly bring up animal exploitation as if there's nothing wrong with it. So, if any of you out there feel the same way, the upcoming playthrough series is dedicated to you. I'd also like to add real quick that I think by the next time I make a more concise, focused video like this, I'm going to have a much better camera to work with. Right now I'm working with my phone because my video camera broke, and I'm currently in the process of finding a new one. So there's that. That's all I have for today though. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Peace. It actually landed right this time.